Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 1990s. And this week we're on episode number 65. That's right, we've had 65 of these things. My podcast can finally retire now. It probably should, some people probably think. But anyway, I don't plan on retiring it anytime soon, but let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
This week we're in July of 1994. That's almost 32 years ago. Of course, in the summer. We're recording real time. This is February 2026, and it's been cold as everything. And it's actually today finally in the 40s for the first time. I think might be the first time literally all year. But anyway, that's today. Who cares about that? We're talking about July of '94 when people were probably hoping for the winter. I know I was back then. I realize as I've gotten older that I don't like the cold as much as I used to. Me and the heat. Oh, like you can ask my brothers. When I was a kid, even as a 20-year-old, when I was still playing football with them all out there because they were still teenagers, and I still felt like I was a teenager, so I was playing football with them. But I'd have rules. If it was 85 or above, I would not leave the house. And my brothers, I told the story a couple weeks ago, I think, where we would if our brother Clint, who was the youngest of the brothers, wouldn't play football. Normally he didn't like it. But if we were a shorter man, like an odd man out, and someone didn't want to be the all-time quarterback for both teams, we would yell at him and call him all kinds of names. You need to play. Blah, blah. They do the same thing to me if it was 8. Me and my rule where it's 80. I literally go to the Weather Channel and look. If it's 85, I'm not going out. Like if I was outside playing, it was 84. I come in and get a drink or something. See, it's 85. I don't go back out. That was my rules forever. It probably still should be. But these days, 85 don't feel as bad to me as it used to. And 25 feels a million times worse than it used to. But anyway, sorry about the frog in the throat crap. Like I said, this is almost 32 years ago, back in July of 94. This is our 9th trip through 1994, by the way. So I think this 94 is the year that I've done the most. Now get me a Dr. Pepper before I throw it down the basement. It's an inside joke. I've told the story before. About living in Norwood and having to sneak Marky Foe, our stepdad from Hell's Dr. Peppers. I'd be the master at opening. I should have done that on camera. See if I can still open it without making noise. And then we stand there and drink it right at the kitchen steps that lead down to the basement. And if we hear him coming, because anybody can hear him coming, he thumps through the freaking house. I take it, throw as hard as I can down the steps. There was a brown stain on the wall forever from that. You always have to clean it up later. But anyway, I was going to say, my favorite pop of all time is Surge, but 94 Surge wasn't out yet. Surge wasn't out very long, sadly. They've tried to bring it back, but Coke is just stupid and won't bring it back for everybody. No, but they'll come out with that weird crap. Like, what is that crap they came out with? I don't know if it was last year or the year before with Coke. The weird computer language or something that they're giving these. They're not even flavor names. You can't even tell what they are, and they just give it some weird name, and you taste it, and it just tastes like they freaking threw a bag of dog crap in the Coke. I don't know. I miss the good old days. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love all the variations of Mountain Dew they have now, where they didn't have all those years ago. But I'd trade it all for my Surge back. But anyway, at this time I was 10 years old and about to enter the 4th grade. I do want to mention a bonus episode I got coming out February 21st. It's a Saturday. It's if you're watching this when this video drops, it won't be this week. It'll be the next week. But anyway, it's bonus episode number 17, and it's where I take all of Garth Brooks' studio albums, not like greatest hits or box sets or anything like that, just the studio albums, and I rank them, and I think there's 14 of them. Yeah, and I just rank them from first to last, in my opinion. Really is no bad Garth Brooks album, but by doing the research, I've done the research. I haven't actually shot the video yet, but I've realized like which ones I really love and which ones I wouldn't even say aren't the best because they're still good. But so if you're doing a ranking list, something's got to be last. I mean, you can't have everything tied for first, otherwise why have a list? But anyway, let's get into this podcast. By the way, I should also mention I'm in the middle of creative process of creating an album. I'm about halfway through it, although I think I'm re-recording what I've done already, just because the sound quality is better than some of my other recordings using a different device to record, so I'm going to use that. That's a little, nobody cares about that crap anyway. But seriously, it's a lot of fun writing these songs and recording them. Like I said, I think I'm going to just re-record them. But hopefully that comes out sometime this year, and I'll have it literally streaming like everywhere anything streams, so you'll be able to stream the whole thing if you want. Hopefully you guys will like it. It's 90s country music made in today's world, so we'll see how that goes. Anyway, to the 90s, July 1994. I do want to talk about the book that came out this month. Is one of the Goosebumps' most... Goosebumpses? Is that even a word? One of the Goosebumps series, one of the best books they came out with was number 21. It was called Go Eat Worms. I remember this well. It's about the kid that like was obsessed with these worms, and then he like cut one in half, and then they're coming after him for revenge. It was also an episode of the TV show, also another well-loved episode. I believe it was season 2, episode 6, I think. Yeah, episode 6. But yeah, that was the only book of note, for me anyway, that came out then. I'm sure there's all kinds of other literary masterpieces. You know me on here. If it's not Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Tales from the Crypt, Goosebumps, or Stephen King, I'm not reading it. Well, that's not exactly true. I'll read other things. It's just, especially back then, I wouldn't have read nothing else. But a lot going on in the news for July of 94. Amazon is actually founded this month. Yes, the company now known as Amazon. You're probably like, how did you order something off there then? Well, Amazon was definitely different then. Founded by Jeff Bezos, of course. And it was originally a bookstore that was ran out of his garage. And it was called Cadabra. I guess for abracadabra. Yeah, it started as a simple bookstore in a garage. And he had this dream of it being like an everything store. Basically what it is now. And the very next year he started the very first... website for it. I don't exactly remember when it was named Amazon. It might have been like 98 or something. But I remember when it came out, like being like, this like big online bookstore, which was revolutionary for the time. I mean, but yeah, everybody thinks of Kindle as being one of the biggest like e-reading devices, and of course it was started by Amazon because like I said, originally a bookstore, and then it's hard to think of a time where there's not Amazon. Everybody's got their Prime shipping, which, depending on whether they do it right, it gets there on time. If not, they don't seem to offer you any kind of discount for your membership if it don't get there on time. They just blame the mailman or whatever. Of course, if you're in a bigger city, they just have people deliver it from the warehouse usually. Around here, we got to wait for it to come in the mail, and who knows if it actually gets to the right mailbox, but that has nothing to do with anything. Like I said, Amazon created then, and it's, I remember a few years, like 10, 15 years ago or whatever it was, eBay was the king of like online, merchandise places. But, Amazon, of course, they're able to get all their material, some of the stuff they get, I swear they get from, people just barely above Temu for some of their quality. But there is a lot of good quality on Amazon. I'm not going to totally crap on them and call them Wish or something like that. You have to look at the ratings, and another thing when you're ordering from there is you have to look at the, not, my wife's going to kill me for saying this, but anytime we get something on there, she's always putting stuff in the cart, and then I have to check it to make sure it's not like coming from China, especially if it's something we need quickly, because if it is, it's like, It'll say like order it today, February. What the freak day is it? February 9th. It'll be here March 28th. You have to go find one that's in the States so it gets here closer. But anyway, I'm sure everybody has to deal with that stuff. Or they ordered something thinking it was, they got Prime, so it'll be here in 3 days, and it's 3 months. But some other news, of course, around this time, the O.J. Simpson stuff was really getting going. I mean, the murders had just happened. They had a preliminary trial on July 8th. And by the way, I'm a huge, O.J. Simpson trial historian. Well, historian, like I'm some famous or fancy person. But this was, on the TV. I can't explain today. Today with, yesterday was the Super Bowl, and everybody was talking, of course, about the halftime show versus the other halftime show, and all the political and non-political and this and that and everything. And you see how big that blew up because of Facebook. Back then, stuff didn't get blown up like that, and of course they didn't have social media then. But when something was big like that on TV and talked about on all the channels and all the time, and literally showed some of the trial in school, and when the verdict was read, every TV was on, and every school probably in America. But I mean, it was known as the trial of the century, so it became huge and ingrained in my head. And of course, I always thought that OJ got away with it, and a lot of people did, and a lot of people didn't too. But I've read so many books on this, seen tons of documentaries. I haven't watched the full trial, although I watched the Court TV documentary on it where they show a bunch of stuff from the trial. I believe the trial is on there to watch. I can do it if I want to, but I've just so engrossed with the O.J. Simpson trial that I read everything I can get my hands on. I'm actually reading a book now that was actually put out in '95, so it was fairly close to this, where and I just started it, but it's written for the point of view of people on the defense side. The book doesn't seem to say OJ didn't do it. It's giving interviews with people on the defense side, so they're talking, and like I said, it just started. This book is a book I found, and can't remember, or we got it from somebody or something. They were giving away stuff, but yeah, it's I've read all kinds of, even OJ's stupid book, If I Did It, where he gives out the scenario of what would happen if he would have done it. See, to me, O.J. Simpson is, he could have easily, after he was acquitted, because I don't know if you're in other countries, but here in America, if you're acquitted of something, you can't get tried for it again, which is a good rule to have, I guess, because that way there's no, you can't get charged for something if you've, been acquitted for it. But at the same time, if someone that literally leaves somebody to be free to just say, hey, I did it, you can't do nothing to me, And I think the only people are well, if OJ would have done it, he would have just admitted it, and he couldn't get in trouble. To him, it's not about that. It's about his ego. He wants everybody to think he was this perfect husband, and none of that domestic abuse ever happened. That was clearly documented in pictures and in police calls. And you can say what you want about the police and the racist Mark Furman detective and everything else, and I'm not denying that. But that stuff was all documented by people that had nothing to gain by it. Even some of his friends were testifying against him. But anyway, back to my original point: is his ego was too big to ever admit that he did it. No matter what. You could have offered him $1 billion, he still wouldn't have admitted to it. But he'll dance his way around it. Oh, if I did it, and all this stuff, and just... And you're not supposed to talk ill about the dead. Well, I don't care, because it's O.J. Simpson. But anyway, all this to say, during this time, on July 8th, in fact, of '94, they had a preliminary trial to decide if there was enough evidence to try him, and of course there was. And a few days later, he gave a hair sample. And 2 days after that, he offered this $500,000 reward for anybody with knowledge of what happened to his wife. Yeah, he should have collected his own reward. But then 2 days after that, as that famous scene where he's pleading not guilty. He's like, 100% absolutely not guilty. And anyway, my actual thoughts on that is, if the Furman thing hadn't happened, then I guarantee that put a lot of doubt in some of the jury's mind about whether some of the stuff was planted. I don't think anything was actually planted. There was too many other policemen for that to happen, and I know I'm not naive, like, oh, the police wouldn't do that. It's just there's so much evidence there, and he was such an evil freaking person to Nicole to begin with, that I believe that evidence was there and not planted. But like I said, the Furman stuff tainted that, and also the stupid, I don't want to call him stupid, was it Darden, not the associate prosecutor, the assistant prosecutor, decided, or talked Marcia, the main prosecutor, into having OJ try on the gloves. And of course, there's the theories of, one, it showed it didn't fit him, even though these are they showed that these are special gloves that he ordered, and they're only so many made and only from one place, and they had experts, they had all this testimony. But anyway, either they didn't fit because they weren't his gloves, or everybody else thinks, which I don't know exactly. It's a combination, I think, of the gloves being older and the one having blood on it, so it kind of shrunk some, plus him playing it up. Of course, he's gonna try to, first of all, he had to have rubber gloves on to try these gloves on anyway, so I guess that way they can't, oh, look, stop, Snuggles. My dog likes to do that out of nowhere. That way he can't put his DNA and say, oh, look, they got his DNA in the gloves. But anyway, you got rubber gloves on. The gloves are older and have shrunk some. And, of course, he's going to play it up, trying to fit it on and all that stuff, And, of course, the famous Johnny Cochran, that piece of crap line, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. Anyway, I spent enough time on that idiot. My thoughts on him. But one other set of news, some actual justice that happened. Tonya Harding, if anybody remembers that thing, her ex-husband was sentenced to 2 years in prison for his attack on Nancy Kerrigan. Of course, that was a big story, the figure skating of, trying to make the Olympic team. Tonya Harding was jealous of Nancy Kerrigan and literally had her attacked by her ex-husband with a freaking metal pipe, hitting her in the knee, taking her out, so Tonya Harding could try to make the team. Just one of the most bizarre things in Olympic history, just any history. But anyway, let's move on from that dark stuff and talk about some kid meal toys. One of my favorite things to talk about on here. It's fun to look up these things. It's probably one of the things that take the longest on researching for the podcast. But it's fun to look up this stuff. Of course, McDonald's with the Happy Meal is the most known. They had their Adventure at Walt Disney World Epcot Center toys. And these were 8 toys of famous Disney characters like Mickey Mouse and I almost said Scooby-Doo. I was looking down. So yeah, Scooby-Doo is a famous Disney character. Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, all of them. But each one was, I think Mickey Mouse was from the USA, but the other characters were from different countries. And wearing outfits and had, things on the figure that, showed it was a different country. Burger King had the Lion King toys out. Of course, the Lion King had just come out. It was either I think it was the month before. And, of course, these toys were they had the adult Simba, Timon and Pumbaa, and the Scar toys. And they would actually, these toys would be so popular, and the movie, that around December they re-released Lion King in the theaters, for Christmas time, I guess, to make more money off that for anybody that hadn't seen it in theaters. And they actually re-released these toys in December as well, so, got their money's worth out of them. Wendy's had Sun Patrol toys. I love when restaurants do this, give out stuff that goes with whatever season it is. These were 6 different toys for the summer, use it the pool and the beach, and there was a ball that blows up and stuff like that. I love when these when they come out with these things that are not just the figures, but stuff that's useful like that. Or during when school starts back up, inevitably one of the restaurants will give out back to school stuff, you know, like pencils and stuff like that, you know. Kind of a cool different thing. If you actually had the money to like go to all these restaurants in this month and pick up all these things, that would be like the coolest thing ever. I have a feeling there's someone out there that's like got every kids meal toy from the 90s of every month from like every restaurant that gave them out and has a collection. And I'd like to see that collection someday. Taco Bell had the Trendsetter sticker sets. And these were 3 different sets. They were all colored differently. And just basically like the different trends from the 90s. So you'd see stuff that was like popular, you know, back then in the mid 90s on these stickers. And of course, if you find them on eBay today, the most you can do is buy them. I guarantee you, if you tried to use the stickers, they probably wouldn't work because, you know, it's been 30 something years. Like I said, this stuff's not going to still stick. Hardee's had Nicktoons. They had a set of 8 rolling, you know, the rolling toys, you know, with the figure with like, you know, wheels on it basically. And they had 8 of them, and they had 2 each from 4 of the Nicktoons. Of course, the 3 original Nicktoons were Ren and Stimpy, Rugrats, and Doug. And then also Rocko's Modern Life had just come out. So there was 2 from each, and I have written down, well, typed down, what they were. They had the Tommy Pickles from Rugrats on a riding horse, Angelica Pickles on a tricycle, Doug Funny in a race car, his dog Pork Chop, of course those are from Doug, on a skateboard. And then from Rocko's Modern Life, got Rocko on the Suckomatic vacuum, Spunky, his his dog, on a rolling bowl. And then from Ren and Stimpy, they had Ren in a spaceship and Stimpy in a spaceship. They didn't give much. I guess some of the things they had in Ren and Stimpy they couldn't reproduce as toys. But Arby's had Scooby-Doo dough, is what it was called. And everybody knows, of course, Play-Doh. Well, they couldn't call this Play-Doh because it was, you know, wasn't the actual Play-Doh brand, but they just called it molding dough with Scooby-Doo characters, so you could like make the characters and make it into stuff. And of course, I guarantee the quality probably wasn't that good. Everybody probably used it with their regular Play-Doh at home. They couldn't just say use with Play-Doh, you know. So they give out their own little set of dough, and if everybody remembers Play-Doh, you just remember that smell and just all the fun you could do. I remember having the Play-Doh, all kinds of different molding things. I have this one where this like thing went down like this, and it would, you know, push out, you know, and you move the sliding thing over, and you know, it would push it down, and it would, you know, whatever shape there, you have a star, other different things, but the star is the one I remember the most. And it would just come out, you know, in that shape. It just, Play-Doh was like the most simple but the coolest thing ever. And then finally, Subway had a set of 4 Tom and Jerry toys, because Tom and Jerry's been popular ever since Looney Tunes started. But I've been doing some research for this, and I'll have some pictures actually like pop up during this. I don't do like the picture-in-picture thing because that's on another video editor I have, and it like takes so long to save on that one. If I did that, I'd have to do these podcasts like 3 weeks in advance just because I got an old, slow computer, okay? But anyway, some pictures I'll show will be the actual house, well, what it looks like now, but it's pretty much the same of where we lived. At this time, we were living in 5724 Section Avenue, the very last house in Norwood before you get to Bond Hill, which is literally the house next door, and it literally changes the address. Like, we're 5724 Section Avenue, and the next house over is whatever the number is. I don't know if it's 5728, it might be, but it's Rhode Island Avenue. It's weird. You go down that way, it's Rhode Island Avenue. You go down that way, it's Section. But anyway, so pictures of that, and then the park that we never got to go anywhere hardly ever. But when we did, we went to this park because it was the closest. And then the UDF where I stole the wrestling magazines. But besides that, great memories of getting chocolate malts there. It's my favorite thing from United Dairy Farmers. A chain store in Cincinnati started by Carl Linder, if you don't know, if you're not familiar with where I'm from. Norwood, Ohio is, of course, in Hamilton County, which is where Cincinnati is. But, and then Norwood View, the school. And I'll see if I can find some other pictures. As you can tell, I haven't found them yet on Google Maps of like, because there's this place, this little store we went to where we got these chips that Marky Foe got for us, and we were like obsessed with at the time, called Corky's Barbecue Chips. I think that company still exists, but I think it's like Corky's Barbecue. Like, I think it might be even a restaurant or something, like the Carolinas or something. It's nowhere around here, but there wasn't even anything special about the chips. Everybody knows me. I'm from Cincinnati. Grippo's barbecue chips are #1. I just had some last night for the Super Bowl. But we were obsessed with these Corky's barbecue chips. But I'll try to get some pictures and give some context of what they are. Maybe I think I'll do like a short little video where I do a picture-in-picture and talking about them, maybe. Something like that. If not, I'll just put on the screen. But anyway, or maybe do a little slideshow video or something. I don't know. But anyway, we moved into Norwood probably, I think it was around December of 93. So we'd been there, 7 months already. Getting to know everybody in the neighborhood. Our neighbor was just the sweetest woman ever. I want to talk about her. I actually looked up some information on the houses. But her name was Dorothy. And I think her husband had just died recently, not too long ago. I can't remember if we'd lived there while he died or not. I want to say I think so. But we didn't hardly know her at the time. And she had this VW Volkswagen. One of them old ones, like cream color. And we called it the Dorothy bus. That's what we called it. And she was coming down with Alzheimer's disease. And it advanced pretty rapidly. Like, when we first knew her, she was, I don't want to use the terms like all there or not all there because I don't want to sound derogatory. My own grandma, my granny died of Alzheimer's disease. So it's not something I ever joke about. Although, I can't say that. I always joke, my wife forgets something. You got Alzheimer's disease. Obviously, the disease itself is not a joke. It's just one of them stupid things you say flippantly, not really thinking about it. But yeah, she came down with it, and it advanced pretty quickly because, she was like, her mind was definitely slipping badly by the time that she'd passed away. But I remember that we'd actually got the house, it was either November or December, and then I think they closed on it in January of 95. So, we moved into this house we were renting, but Dorothy's house, after she passed away, she wasn't even in the ground yet, literally. And Marky Foe had already worked out a deal with the freaking realtor company to buy the house, which makes me mad to think about now. But he had me go out there in like frigid weather to take the for sale sign that was in the. Actually, I guess it was in the market if it had this for sale sign, but because I think she'd moved out. Yeah, that's what happened. Because I think she moved out with her kids, or she went into a nursing home. Or even a hospice, I think, before she'd actually, she died, so the house was on the market for a while. But yeah, she wasn't even in the ground yet, and Marky Foe bought it, and that's where we have the most memories. I was looking it up today. My brother Josh was like, "That house," because I was showing him stuff about it. Like, it only cost $30,000 for my parents to buy that in 1995. Well, the end of 94, 95. And the house is only worth $80,000 today, and it's I don't see like all there's like maybe I just live in an area where these houses are just ridiculously priced these days, and they don't even look nowhere near as big as this house. And I mean, there's not a lot of land this house where we lived at all, but there's a detached garage, there's a basement, there's 2 floors. So unless like the floors are literally rotting, which I don't think they are, I don't see how it's only $80,000. But anyway, if the house ever comes up for available, me and my brothers go get some money together and buy this place, I swear. But yeah, it's just so many. And like I said, talking about Dorothy, she was just the sweetest woman. She was so nice to us. And I was doing some research. I think it was like 1962 or 67, I can't remember, is when she'd originally got the house. I think she got it from a family member, from what it looked like. But yeah, she'd owned that house since the 60s, and of course Marky Foe had to marky it up, building this stupid. He built this stupid wall out of like lumber that went from like the back to the front, just on the side. I don't even know what the point of it was, other than just put some plants behind it. But it was the worst summer ever, because you hear the stories about you holding a flashlight for your dad and him yelling at you for not holding it right or something. Imagine that on steroids, or I should say on drunk. like, you get one thing wrong, you hand him, every nail has a name, and if it's, he, like, named his nails, like, at the different lengths. Like, he was so stupid. Anyway, like, you hand him the wrong one, and you get smacked in the head, and punched, and everything else. It was brutal. I hated working with him outside. That was, like, the worst. I would rather stay inside and do dishes to the end of time, which I almost had to do anyway. But anyway, most of my memories come from there. I don't have a ton of memories from the house we were actually in at this time, the one we were renting. Other than, it was literally right next door, and, it was probably close to a similar layout. Not exactly. They weren't like carbon copy houses like you see them build nowadays, where they build all these houses and they all look the same and probably designed exactly the same inside. But, similar makeup, similar small amount of land. Of course, this was before most of the abuse started taking place, so we were still allowed to go outside some days in. But we became friends with so many people in the neighborhood, especially once we moved next door, because then we were right next door to these 3 girls that were like our best friends ever. The ones I told before, they got a trampoline in the backyard. We play hide and seek, and their dad didn't want us back there playing on the trampoline. I say, "You play too much." That phrase always so funny, especially when you're talking to kids that are playing. Like, we're playing hide and seek. We play too much. We supposed to go, it's like slow motion. But anyway, whenever I would love when I was it, because everybody would go hide, and I wouldn't even look for them. I'd just go into their backyard, jump on the trampoline until I got caught. But yeah, just so many memories of that time. Like I said, I'll show some pictures on here. Try to give some context of it. It was, like I said, talk about some of the horrible memories, but it's funny how I still look at this time as so fondly. Like, it's weird to, and it's not just my way of coping with it. Humor is kind of a way I cope with things, but when I look back at this time now, like, I have no bad feelings at all, despite all the messed up crap that guy put us through. I just, it's over. He didn't, I can't speak for my brothers or anything, but he didn't, like, ruin my life with his stuff like I could tell he wanted to. That's my ultimate revenge, although I say that, and I actually forgave him years ago. He actually passed away a few years ago, and that's a whole story, but, long before that even, I'd forgiven him. I don't think I ever said it to him personally, because in his mind, he never did anything wrong. Literally, he would say, "I beat you because I love you." You always hear the tough fathers that whip their kids or punish their kids. They do it because they love you. That's what a real father does. Not, you don't beat somebody. But anyway, there's a million Marky Faux-isms, I guess you could say. He always say, "Grin and bear it," whenever he made us do something we didn't want to do that was, like, ridiculous, like just staying up until 3 in the morning, and I got to get up to go to little school the next day, but I had to stay up at 3 in the morning washing his clothes because he didn't want to do it. Grin and bear it. That and he had this thing. My brother Clint was born in 90. He was born in 94. The month before this. He was actually born the month before this. I didn't realize I wasn't even thinking about that. But he's like, "I can deal with blood and all this stuff, but I can't deal with poop." Literally, he couldn't change his diaper. He needed 2 things. And I'm not exaggerating, not joking. A beer and a bucket. He would literally have to have a beer, because he had to have a beer anytime. I think that was just part of his mandatory life. But he had to have a bucket to throw up in while he was changing the diaper. It was so freaking ridiculous. But anyway, I'll talk more about memories there. I could go on all day on that. That may be a bonus episode someday. Just all the Marky Faux memories. I'd like to do that one with my brothers. I still want to do a podcast with my brothers. It's kind of on the back burner right now because, scheduling and everything. But I would like to do one where we talk about all our childhood stuff with my brothers. That'd be fun to talk about. But I want to talk about some movies that came out this month. It was a big month for movies. Like I said, Lion King had just come out, so 94 itself was big. But one of the biggest movies of all time, and one of my favorites of all time, came out this month, Forrest Gump. Man, I love that movie. Where it just takes all the historical stuff that happened and puts Forrest in the basically in it. It was directed by Robert Zemeckis. And he actually did, if you ever seen Tales from the Crypt, which is one of my favorites, I believe it was season 6, the last episode. It's called You Murderer. It had John Lithgow, or Lithgow, however you say it. But it actually starred Humphrey Bogart, and if you're like wondering, and this came out in 96, I think. It was at 96. Yeah, it was when the episode came out. But Humphrey Bogart was dead by then, I think. I'm pretty sure. But they used the old footage just, and it was directed by Robert Zemeckis, just like this. In the beginning of that Crypt Keeper, Crypt Keeper dressed as Forrest Gump, and he had got a box of chocolates, but it's got like fingers and eyes in it. Because of course. But yeah, Forrest Gump was so good. The way they would mix in the historical stuff and come up with this crazy story. And Tom Hanks, I'm almost positive he won the Oscar for this. And it won tons of Oscars for this movie. But, I mean, he played that role so good. Like, you believed he was Forrest Gump. Absolutely love that movie. My mom loved it, too. In fact, she got the book. It was actually a book that had been out for a while. But they, like, re-released it because, it was in theaters. So, of course, they put the Tom Hanks sitting on the bench on the cover of this book. And it was actually the book, not the book for, like, the movie. Like, they'll sometimes write out a novelization of a movie, even if it already has a book. No, this is the book version, and it goes even crazier. Like he does all kinds. Like he becomes a professional wrestler in the thing. He even goes to space with a freaking monkey at some point. And I can't remember if it was this one or the second one, because there was actually a sequel to it. Like all the stuff in and it's cool in the sequel because the sequel comes out after the movie. So he's talking in it like because of course he becomes rich, by the end. Well. He runs out of money and everything, and he got ripped off from his Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, and so in the second one he's poor again, and he keeps finding all these ways to make money and become poor again. But anyway, he actually talks about them making a movie based on his life, the Forrest Gump, and actually meeting Tom Hanks in the book. Like, I can't remember exactly what that's called, but there's 2 of them. You should definitely. I can't remember. I think Winston Groom is I was going to say Winston Churchill. Winston Groom is the author of these books. I can't remember the second one, but the first Forrest Gump, and is set, kind of a universe of its own. The second one incorporates the movie, but by still sticking to the original story. But Forrest Gump was certainly one of those movies. I'm pretty sure the first time I seen it is we rented it from probably Hollywood Video. We didn't go to Blockbuster all that much because Hollywood Video was always cheaper. But another movie that came out that we'd rented and watched over and over again was Angels in the Outfield. And I believe this is a remake from the 60s, I think, maybe 70s? I think 60s. It was originally a Disney movie from them, but of course a Disney movie for the 90s. And I loved the 90s kids sports movies. Little Big League about the kid that the Minnesota Twins baseball team, so he now owns it. Rookie of the Year about the kid that breaks his arm and can like throw a fastball like super fast, so he gets signed by the Chicago Cubs. Of course, the Mighty Ducks, the Big Green, which I'd only seen recently. My wife got me to watch that. I never watched them before. Same with The Sandlot, 2 classic movies from the time I just never watched, but my wife got me to watch them and I loved them. Yeah, these sports movies, I'm probably gonna forget some of them. Little Giants, the football one with Ed O'Neill and Rick Moranis about the 2 brothers. One's a rich one and one's is not, and they both coaching football teams. Just so many great sports movies for kids in the 90s. There's like a whole subgenre of that. But anyway, Angels in the Outfield, one of the greatest. Danny Glover plays the coach. That little kid. Me and my wife quote him all the time. Anytime this movie comes up or anything about this movie, the little kid always say, "It can happen." I love that. That movie is just so good. Has a great message in it. And another movie that came out was just crazy movie was The Mask, Jim Carrey. Of course, this was the time when Jim Carrey was going nuts with these movies. Ace Ventura, not just nuts like crazy in his character, but like just becoming insanely popular. Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, which I didn't care for. This, The Mask. I'm forgetting another really big one. I feel like I am. I can't remember. It'll pop into my head. One of my favorite movies of his all time is probably The Cable Guy, which is probably not on a lot of people's list of favorite Jim Carrey movies. But that movie is so hilarious and like scary and creepy and perfect. Like, I love that movie. But yeah, Jim Carrey was the man at the time. The Mask was just an insane movie where he got to be as animated as he wanted it to be. Like, you know, if you don't know what that is, watch the movie. He finds this like ancient mask and like puts it on his face and turns him into this crazy character. And there's like the mob in it, and it's a throwback looking movie. It reminds me a lot of Dick Tracy, which I believe came out in the early 90s. I remember watching that with my mom all the time, and even getting the little plastic Dick Tracy watch, I think from Burger King. I can't wait till that comes up on here. I purposely not looked it up to see when it was, just so I can be surprised. The little Dick Tracy, because the Dick Tracy watch, if you know what I'm talking about, it's like this little communicator, which of course nowadays smartwatch, big deal. But back then it was like some futuristic technology that probably would never happen. Now look at the world. But yeah, and I remember getting it and it was like disappointing because I thought I could actually call somebody on it. Stupid kid stuff. But yeah, The Mask, just such a great movie. Now I want to talk about music. Of course, I give the charts. And I always snicker when I read the Billboard Hot 100 because of a certain thing. Okay, Marky Foe, of course, Marky Foe again, the stepdad from hell. He had these tapes. Let's just say they're for adults only, okay? And as kids, of course, we're gonna freaking explore these things. We shouldn't, but you know how kids can be. But anyway, there was a tape called Hot 100, and let's just say it was adults only. But there would be this, like, once we discovered these things, like, it's not like I'd put it on and watch it or something until I was a couple years later as a teenager. But it would be this like game. Like my brother Josh and Travis, I think was Travis involved? He was like 3. But it was mostly Josh because he was the one who released a VCR. They would sneak up there and grab this tape and put it on the VCR and then turn the TV up loud and just be like off hiding, laughing as I like come running into the room trying to turn it off because they knew, like, if the neighbors heard it or if our parents came home and seen it, that I would be the one blamed for it. It'd be like this game, and I'd take it out and put it up, and they'd go find it and do it over again. But anyway, that's Hot 100. The actual Hot 100 of not adult things, well, I guess technically it is, because it's ran by adults, but anyway, music, huge song in music. I know this song from John Michael Montgomery, but it was also a massive hit for the group All For One. It was called I Swear. I mean, that song was massive. It was number 1 for the whole month of July, the whole month of June, and half of May, 11 weeks total. Massive number 1. The American Country Countdown is what I was listening to at the time, of course. And there was a big number 1 from Neil McCoy. He didn't have many number 1 hits, but I liked a lot of his music. The song Wink, it was number 1 for 2 weeks, and also 2 weeks back in June for 4 weeks total. So on the country charts, that's pretty big, if you, especially back in those days. If you get a 4-week run, that's how you know a song is big. And then Travis Tritt's Foolish Pride was number 1 for a week. And then another big song by Alan Jackson, Summertime Blues. It was number 1 for the last 2 weeks of the month, and then 1 week in August for 3 weeks total. And of course, I can't remember the original artist of that, but I believe it was a song from the 60s. But of course, I didn't know that. And then I thought, no, Alan Jackson made it up. He's going to raise a fuss and raise a holler. As a kid, we were just singing along like we knew what half these things meant. But album that was released this month, it actually isn't a country album, and I wasn't listening to it at this time, but since, I've loved the album, and it's one of the biggest albums of all time, sold 20 million copies. It's Hootie and the Blowfish's debut album, Cracked Rear View. Of course, they're biggest songs from the album are probably Hold My Hand, Only Want to Be With You, and my favorite of theirs, Let Her Cry. That song is like amazing. I love that freaking song. I did that song karaoke once. But yeah, I wasn't listening to them at the time, and of course, Darius Rucker, the lead singer, would go on in the late 2000s to do country music, and has been doing it ever since, I believe, and been very successful. But this album was like massive, and it was their very first album, and I don't think they had too much, unless I'm wrong, too much success after that, or just not as much success as, because the music industry changes so rapidly, especially with, pop music, because pop music encompasses everything. Sometimes country music if there's crossover, but normally like rock music, the music they just basically just call pop music, like, stuff from like boy bands, and then R&B music, and rap is kind of like country. Sometimes they'll have stuff that will cross over to the pop charts. But it was, it's a format that like changes quickly. Back in the mid 90s when this came out, where grunge had been huge for years, and now you got these mid 90s like rock bands that aren't completely grunge. They're just different sounds. And then you would get it would wouldn't be long before, as you see with the All For One song taking over, and R&B stuff, and then the boy band stuff, and then the stuff like Britney Spears, that the really popular stuff. It just, you go from one year to the next and look like completely different types of music, and it's just all within like a year of each other. Yeah, but I think that's probably why Hootie and the Blowfish, unless there's other things going on, like they had problems or something that I didn't I'm not aware of. Probably why they didn't have as much success later on is just because formats change so quickly in music. But I want to move on and talk about sports. So talk about baseball. We're in July, of course, mid-season there. The leaders of the season at the end of the month for the National League were the Reds. Yay for us, finally. The Expos, which of course don't exist anymore. They're now the Washington Nationals. And the Dodgers, of course, Dodgers. There was a period of time when the Dodgers weren't winning everything. Back when they had owners that didn't have more money than 300 different countries. But anyway, the American League leaders were the Yankees, the White Sox, and the Rangers. And of course, this month they had the All-Star game. The National League, for the first time since like 1987, beat the American League 8-7 in 10 innings. This was held at Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Of course, the home of the Pirates and the Steelers at the time. And then, of course, each of those teams would get their own stadium. It was one of those so-called cookie-cutter stadiums, just like Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia, Riverfront Stadium, Cincinnati. Just the completely round, all-purpose AstroTurf stadiums, which I loved, but I can see why they went to the different parks, some of the newer parks they've made in the last 20, 25, 30 years have really been a step up. Speaking of that, one of the biggest ones, I think it's called T-Mobile Park now, but forever it was called Safeco Field. They had WrestleMania 19 there for the Seattle Mariners Stadium. But forever they were playing in this like domed, because of course being in Seattle they need a roof, this like domed stadium called the King Dome. Well, during this time, tiles started falling off the ceiling, and they ended up thinking they just had to replace a few. They ended up having to replace the whole ceiling. So during the few months, and I'll get into why there wasn't much baseball left in this year in a minute, but they had all their home games. They had to play against the teams that they would have played at home on the road and actually play in their stadium, but be the home team. But I was talking last week about the Montreal Expos, the steel beam falling, and they had to cancel the rest of the games of the season there. Well, kind of the same thing here. But, of course, what I was talking about just a little bit ago was there wouldn't be much baseball left. In fact, the players voted during this month that a month from now, in the mid-August, they would go on strike. And that's what happened. So there was no World Series, no postseason at all, no World Series. And the Reds would have made the playoffs based on the record at the end. Of course, if they would have finished out the rest of the year, who knows? But we were actually in good shape there. In fact, the next year when baseball comes back, we do make the playoffs, although I don't think we go too far. I think it's our last time in the playoffs until 2010. But anyway, yeah, and baseball wouldn't be the same again for a while. Of course, like I said, no World Series. The season ended sooner than expected, so no champions at all. And in fact, the strike went on so long that they had to delay the start of the 95 season because it was like the strike was going into spring training, and they had to have a few weeks to get spring training for players to get warmed up. You can't just start baseball out of nowhere because teams weren't practicing, they weren't doing anything. I'm sure the players were probably keeping in shape and and practicing it on their own, but still, nothing like the spring training schedule. So anyway, baseball would not really recover until like 98 when the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa home run chase started. That's pretty much when baseball started getting popular again because they lost a lot of trust. The players, the owners, the league, everybody. The fans were not happy, and I don't blame them. If you follow something like baseball passionately, you go through the season, especially if you got a team you really love, like I did with the Reds. You go through the season, you hope your team makes it to the playoffs. Even if not, you usually watch the playoffs sometimes, like I do. I always watch them. Definitely watch the World Series, and all that was taken away because of greed. And the players are still they still got enough money to survive. So do the owners. So do the league. The only people that screwed are the fans. But anyway, talk about NASCAR. Jimmy Spencer, who drove the number 27 McDonald's car, the Ford, won the Pepsi 400, which was the night race at Daytona, because the most popular one's the Daytona 500. But the night race is like I think 100 miles shorter, and it's laps. No, it's miles. They don't do 500 laps at Daytona. They'd be there all night. And he also won the Die Hard 500 at Talladega, two of NASCAR's biggest races of the year. And those were actually the only races he ever won in his NASCAR career. He was mostly like a drag racer, but I guess he tried to transition and just, he won a couple races, but I guess it didn't pan out in the long run. Ricky Rudd drove the number 10 Tide car, which one of those, the McDonald's and the Tide, a lot of those cars from that time, even when I wasn't watching NASCAR at the time, are just iconic for just the images, like the number 10 Tide Ford. I remember that so well. He won the Slick 50 300, whatever that is, at New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And Jeff Bodine drove the number 7 Exide Batteries Ford, and he won the Miller Genuine Draft 500 at Pocono. And, of course, this was the year that Dale Earnhardt, of course, number 3 GM Goodwrench Chevy, he won his third consecutive, back-to-back NASCAR championship. He'd won, 2 in a row, and then, there was a break in between 2 in a row, and then 2 in a row again. Well, the first time he won, I can't remember if it was his first, I think his first championship he won. But anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. For 3 times in his career, he won two in a row. But anyway, this was his 7th and final championship. Sorry to make a math class there out of nothing. Now I want to take a look at the Nickelodeon lineup. And I specifically chose July 4th, just to see if there's been anything special on Independence Day on Nickelodeon on this day. Of course, I'm not picking Saturday morning cartoons or a TGIF lineup because it's July, which means that it's all reruns, so it's hard to find the right data, and plus they're all reruns. Nickelodeon had a lot of reruns too, but for the most part, you can find accurate scheduling. But anyway, we start, of course, with Nick at Night at midnight with Dragnet. Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Great shows. The Adventures of Superman, F Troop. And then for a couple hours, we got paid programming. You know how fun those things can be. Some of the most cheesiest advertising ever, but if you're up for some reason at that time, it's entertaining. And if you're up at that time, weren't much to watch. Unless you had like HBO or something where you get where they play movies all day. Most of the channels like that went off after midnight or a certain time in the morning, like 2 to 4. And then so I don't think many networks do the paid program anymore. I'm sure some do, But I think it's probably cheaper for some to just show the reruns I already got, and most of the people, companies don't have the money to advertise for paid programming. They just advertise it online for free. But anyway, back to the Nick at Night at 4. We got Mork and Mindy, The Lucy Show, Dick Van Dyke Show, and then at 5:30 we start Nickelodeon off with Mr. Wizard's World from 5:30 to 6:30. Love that. Learned so much science stuff from Mr. Wizard. Then we got Flipper, and of course one of the greatest game shows of all time, Double Dare. Followed by another great game show, also hosted by Mark Summers, What Would You Do? It's like half variety show, half game show there. And then, of course, we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon, Doug, Rugrats, The Alvin Show, which was Alvin and the Chipmunks. I believe it came out in the 80s, and they were still showing it then, but that theme song's going to be stuck in my head now. Watch out, because here we come. So I had to, sorry. Speaking of that, Muppet Babies were next. Followed by The Muppet Show, which I didn't really care for The Muppet Show. I love Muppet Babies. Oh, then we got Sharon Lois and Bram's Elephant Show. Skinnamarink dinky dink, skinnamarink doo. I love you. Oh, God. I'm embarrassing myself today. But I remember these things, they pop into my head. Then another one, and this was my time on Nickelodeon here. The World of David the Gnome. Oh, that's such a classic cartoon. And then Eureka's Castle. Such a crazy freaking puppet show, for lack of a better thing to call it. Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, which is, of course, they take a fairy tale and spin it on its head. This was King Grizzlebeard. I don't think I've ever heard or seen of that. Then Dennis the Menace, the cartoon. I just watched a bunch of those the other day. The classic. Lassie, Gumby. I mean, man, had some great stuff. Bullwinkle's Moose-O-Rama, which was, of course, Rocky and Bullwinkle, just repackaged for Nickelodeon. And then Hey Dude, the teen show where the kids are all working at the Dude Ranch for the summer. And then Wienerville, hosted by Mark Wiener. Talk about crazy puppet show. That was the most insane. Then Beetlejuice, the animated cartoon. Wild and Crazy Kids, another variety / game show. Salute Your Shorts, just like with Hey Dude. Instead of kids working at a or teens working at a dude ranch to earn money during the summer, these are kids going to summer camp. And then Legends of the Hidden Temple. Man, this is some classic Nickelodeon here, I'm telling you. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon again. Doug. The Muppet Show again. And then, so nothing like specifically for July 4th, unless there was some episodes that were around that. But then Nick at Night had a Mary Tyler Moore marathon from 8 to 11:30. It was probably advertised as like the Mary Tyler Moore 4th of July Spectacular or some crap they give it. And then end the night with the Dick Van Dyke Show. But yeah, it's always so fun to look at those lineups, and just especially like there's certain lineups where some are like, I don't remember this and I don't remember this, I didn't like this, and there's some like that. It's like I would have watched that from 5:30 in the morning until 8. I would have sat glued to it, and it's possible I could have done that, because being July, there was a good chance. I mean, it was my mom's birthday, so I was actually probably there then. But there's still a good chance in the summer or it could have been at Granny's, but a good chance that I'm visiting Granny for the weekend or even a week during the summer. I've talked so much about that, but it's still so great to go back to those memories of getting to go over to Granny's house. And oh man, such great times. Only a couple more things to talk about, and I'll be out of your hair. I want to talk about wrestling. July 16th, ECW held its very first Heat Wave, and it was just subtitled "The Battle for the Future." Of course, at the time it was a super card because they weren't on pay-per-view yet, but held at the ECW arena. Sabu, blah, blah, that sounds weird. The Tasmaniac had a mystery partner, which turned out to be Sabu, and they defeated the Pitbulls. And then also on the same card, ECW champion Shane Douglas retained his title, defeating Sabu by countout. So Sabu worked double that night, but that's not anything strange for ECW. The main event, which got its name, the Battle for the Future. It was the past versus the future. The Public Enemy defeated Terry and Dory Funk Jr. in a barbed wire match, which is where they take the ropes off and they put up barbed wire as the ropes. I think the one that I remember seeing the most was the Sabu versus Terry Funk, I think from 98. But if you've never seen one of these matches, it's insane. Like, it's as crazy as it sounds. There's no ring ropes, there's just barbed wire, and you get thrown into them and stuck to it, and they had to be cut out of it, and it's because they didn't use no fake barbed wire in ECW. It was crazy. But the very next night, WCW had their pay-per-view, Bash at the Beach from Orlando, Florida. The very first Bash at the Beach, a couple years prior, they'd done one called Beach Blast, but they just basically renamed it and moved it from June to July. But pretty big show, pretty wonderful. Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff defeated WCW World Tag Team Champions Cactus Jack and Kevin Sullivan to win the titles. But the main event was why everybody was there. It was Hulk Hogan's in-ring debut for WCW. You know, after that, Eric Bischoff signed him, and he had that parade basically, and he, of course, was WWF mainstay and pop culture phenomenon forever. But he decided he was walking away from wrestling. He was doing TV, and of course that wasn't panning out the best. So back to wrestling. But anyway, in the main event, he had like everybody. Muhammad Ali, I think, was out there as like, I can't remember if he was a referee. I think he was a referee. But Hulk Hogan had Shaq and Mr. T and Jimmy Hart in his corner. And he faced WCW World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair, who had Sensational Sherry. And, of course, Hogan won and won the title. Why is this stupid Avast thing popping up on my computer? Trying to advertise. I'm not getting anything other than the freaking free one. I'm cheap, okay? Anyway. Avast is actually pretty good, even their free version, because I haven't had any viruses in years and years since using this. But it has nothing to do with anything. But yeah, big debut, and of course, the reason he went there and not back to WWF is because him and Vince had a falling out because of the steroid thing. And in fact, just 5 days after this, a jury actually acquitted Vince McMahon of forcing his wrestlers to take steroids and like selling them. I think it wasn't forcing. I think it was like selling them or being part of selling them. Basically, the government was trying to say that he forced the wrestlers to take steroids. He made them, or they would be fired. And I don't ever believe that. I think it was probably suggested, and like probably one of the things where they kind of wink like, yeah, if you had you had more muscle on you, maybe you'd be champion, that type of thing. But it wasn't like you take this or you're fired, that type of thing. Trust me, there's plenty Vince McMahon's guilty of, but I don't think it was that. I guarantee he was guilty of using steroids. But anyway, some sad news that happened earlier on July 4th. Referee Joey Morella, who was actually Gorilla Monsoon's son, died in a car wreck. I remember that being a big story, and from what I've heard, Gorilla Monsoon was never the same after that, and can't see how you would be after you got your son in the business that you love, and then all of he's just dead in a car wreck before you know it. It's it's that type of, not to get all philosophical on here, but I mean it's the type of thing that that thing can happen to anybody, no matter how careful of a driver you are, no matter how good of a person you are, bad of a person you are. It really shows that you never know when something's going to happen. So try to, like I said, I'm not trying to be philosophical, but treat each day as if it's your last. But basically, and I don't mean that in a reckless way, just like, it's hard to you always think, you see someone die and you're like, I'm going to start, telling people I love them, and I'm going to start, not letting things get to me. But then you get back into the routine of life, and, the stuff that was making you mad before that you swore, oh, that's not important anymore. It starts making you mad again, All you can do is try to appreciate everything you have, try to find the positive things. But there's no way you're going to be able to sit there and in your worst of times be like, oh, well, I'm still glad for this, things are going bad, they're going bad. But anyway, not trying to get all psychological on you, but I wanted to talk about the end, at the end of the show, about the ending of one of my favorite TV shows of all time, Dinosaurs, the ABC series. It was on for 4 seasons, 65 episodes. And the reason it was canceled was two reasons. One is because ratings were kind of dwindling because they kept moving it around on different channels, or not channels, on different nights and times. And I don't know if that's actually what causes that to happen, like, or they just say that, or if it's the fact that they wanted this show to end, so they purposely moved it around to the nights to lose the ratings. Because supposedly this is like one of the most expensive TV shows, because it's, puppets and everything. One of the most expensive TV shows to produce, like, in history, at least until that time. But, I don't think ABC wanted it to continue, but they did have a finale, though, and it was like one of them dark finales. Like I talked before about David the Gnome being the finale where David the Gnome and his wife, like, die and become trees. And how that, I didn't see that as a kid, but I seen it as an adult, and it still scarred me. But, this is, basically, they know they're dying out because the Ice Age is coming. So, kind of a dark ending there. But also, like, with a message, about, protect the environment. I don't think we're going to have another Ice Age, but people on dinosaurs wanted people to think that could happen. If the dinosaurs can die out, so can you, apparently. But anyway, this has been a fun one. Sorry if I've rambled on too much, as I like to do. It's not on purpose, it's just, But if you're here watching this, what's another half hour? You probably put on the background like, oh, is he done? Shut up already. But anyway, next week I'm going to be on episode 66. I still can't believe I'm 66 episodes into this. This is crazy. We're going to be February of 1998 when we get there, so we're jumping ahead about 4 years. This will be our 8th trip through 1998. And I was 14 at the time, and in 7th grade for the second time, which I've talked about before, but I guarantee I'll touch on that again next week. Thank you for joining me, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or listen to us on Spotify. Got any comments or suggestions, of course, please comment. I always like reading them. I like seeing that people in different countries are actually enjoying this podcast, and even though we have completely different experiences, probably a lot of people in other countries don't follow Major League Baseball, some countries do, but or they don't listen to the same type of music, but then sometimes they do. So it's interesting seeing that even if you talk about stuff that's different, it can still make people think, you were watching this, I never heard of this, but it reminds me of this thing I watched. It was, it's really cool to see that, and that's the whole point of this, is just to look back nostalgically. Try not to look at too many negative things, even though inevitably, that's the word I'm looking for, inevitably comes up. But it's trying to mostly keep it positive and just have a fun look back. And thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
And now I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.